to Ask the Doulas with Gold Coast Doulas. And today we're talking to Kelsey Dean, one of our newest postpartum doulas, and then you've also come on as birth as well.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I wanted to talk specifically about your postpartum experience. So can you kind of tell people where you came from?
Sure.
And the type of experience you've had in California and even in the Detroit area, right?
Sure, yes.
And then specifically, once you talk about that, I want to dive into this traveling aspect of the postpartum doula role.
Very good. Okay. So I started my doula training in 2016 to be a labor doula and postpartum doula. It was just a full spectrum course. So from there, I had intended to start midwifery school right after, and I thought I really want to get more experience. And so I started picking up postpartum clients because it's work that's easy enough to schedule, and it's also such a rich transition time that kind of just called to me more. So I began, I guess, really more so nannying for really small children was kind of how I got into the doula community and practicing, and then by referral started getting young families or families that were planning on having children, so we could plan a little further in advance. And then I became a full postpartum doula in 2017. So it was about a year transition between doing nanny work and just getting what I could kind of find.
Okay.
In Sonoma County, I served families as a postpartum doula. A lot of overnight shifts were something that were really popular there because sleep is
critical.
Yes. So I moved to Michigan in this past summer, in July 2018, and I got really, really fortunate to link up with Jill Ryder from the After Baby Lady Doula Services in Southeast Michigan, and she was great and connected me with so many families in that area. The experience ranged from single parents to families with really extended family that's visiting on and off, a lot of range in socioeconomic status, and that's been really helpful to see too, to just have that wide range of what can we do, what are your best resources. Now I'm getting a little bit more into the traveling doula idea, and sometimes that's day work, sometimes it's overnight. Totally depends on what the family wants, but I'm happy to talk about that more.
Yeah, so what does that look like for a family? Where do you, how far do you travel and how long? And
totally depends on the doula. For me, because I am pretty easily up and mobile, I am willing to go. I can't think of anywhere I wouldn't go. I mean, really, if you're traveling, the idea is that you're essentially bringing another person with you that you would account for like a family member. So you're making sure the family that's hiring is making sure that person has room and board, is able to access everything that they would be accessing, like food and tickets and da-da-da. So in that sense, in some way, it's very easy if you're a single person to just go because you're just jumping in to the plan that's already existing. If it's someplace that's a little closer by, sometimes, when I was with a family up in northern Michigan, it was nice that they made accommodations for me, but they already had a home, and so in that case, it's more of a conversation of what does this look like? If I had family up there or something, I really wouldn't have needed that. But if it were we're going to Mexico and we need a doula, that's definitely,
you'd have your own room.
Yes.
And in northern Michigan, you stayed in a hotel nearby?
I did, yes. And those are usually flexible things too. Airbnbs are really affordable, and if they have an extra, you just would get one with one extra room in it or something like that. That's actually worked out for a couple of doulas that I have been in a collective with in the past, that they just did that house share kind of thing. And then in that time off, usually if they're working overnight shifts, or if doulas are working overnight shifts, then it's easy enough that they wake up and go to bed around 8 a.m. and then the family gets that nice morning time, and then around nap time, everybody gets to go take a nap, and the doula kind of comes back in. So it's a rotating shift kind of thing. It's like having another family member. I mean, traveling is already kind of a stressful event, and a lot of the things that you would worry about as a new parent when you're in your home, okay, if I need to go see my doctor, where are they? How long is this going to take? Or where can I go find this very specific thing that I need for my own health? Elderberry syrup is really popular now because it's the middle of winter, but things like that. doulas tend to think about those things, and we want to know that before we go somewhere, and it's just one less thing for the parents or the family to think about over and over and over again. So it's just like having that extra set of hands that you would need anywhere else.
And what if somebody says, oh, wouldn't it be cheaper to bring a nanny with me? Like, I guess what would be the difference between hiring a nanny and a postpartum doula to come with you?
I like this topic all the time, like traveling or not. Nannies are excellent, and they're meant to be with you for a long period of time and be with you while your child grows, and that's wonderful, but they're not necessarily certified in any education or expertise about your baby. So yes, they might come in like another person that feels very warm and loving, and they feel like another family member in this extension. That's really great, but there might be some really serious cues that they would miss about your newborn because they're not supposed to know. Like, they've never, like, if whether or not they've had kids, they might not have had that experience.
And even cues with the mother, right? Like noticing signs and symptoms of like breastfeeding issues or mental health issues.
Totally.
That a postpartum doula is trained in.
Yes, absolutely. And nannies, I think generally, I mean, I'm thinking about childcare right now, but in general, I mean, nannies really aren't there for a family in the same way that a doula is. A doula is looking at everyone as a spectrum, as a family, whereas a nanny is really there for the childcare.
I think that's a common question in general. That's why I like to ask it. So I like that you like to answer it.
I do. Yeah. And because I've had several of my friends tell me about their nannying experiences with like twins that are 4 weeks old and and it's like, how, like, they just felt super overwhelmed and totally unprepared. And it's like, well, yeah, like you were. You
haven't been trained.
Yeah. And a lot of times the stories are from when my friends, being the nannies or babysitters, they were only like 16, 17, you know, just like totally unprepared for that kind of circumstance.
That's almost like a mother's helper role at that, you know, it's not even, I don't know, I would have a hard time considering a 16-year-old a nanny. Like, it would be more of like a babysitter or a mother's helper.
Yes. Like, if you think of it in like village terms, like a woman that just had, or birthing person that just had a baby, yes, there are those like young women that come in to like do some cleaning and make sure that you have like fresh clothes and you get time to take a bath. But there's also like the matriarch women, like the women that know what's right and wrong and how this process goes. You need both. You know, I think as doulas, we try to cover as much of that spectrum as we can by going through some training and education and experience. And yes, it's great that you also like have the opportunity to have a nanny or someone come in and help in that like soft way, maybe make meals and things like that. But it's just not the whole package.
Yeah, I agree. In a doula, like, we know that we get into this for a temporary amount of time. You know, like, we want to, like you said, it's a full spectrum. We're supporting the whole family, and once the parent or parents feel, you can almost like sense that confidence in them when they're like, you're like, okay, it's time for me to go, you know, and then they're like, well, I don't want you to go. Right. Like, you're ready. You know? Yeah, it's like they're just not ready for you to leave. And sometimes it has to be like a gradual, like, okay, we'll go from 3 days a week to 2 to 1, and it's like this gradual process instead of abruptly ending that relationship.
Yes.
But then that's a great time for a nanny to step in.
It is. It's totally another, I like the concept that doulas are coming in during a transition time, and we try to be these like invisible people, you know, that just have everything going on. But then the reality is that we're not invisible, and it's this subjective experience. And we're like, oh, now you have to transition out of us too, like double transition time. But that's such a good time to connect with like mommy groups in the area, or like you said, a nanny, or we can make those resources and referrals happen too.
Well, and that's the other thing too, we're connected. Doulas are connected in the community. And like you said, we like to know where, if you're having an issue about X, Y, or Z, hey, we know who you should talk to. We know who you should go see. Let me have you call so-and-so. We know how to make those referrals and connections.
Yeah, really can ease that transition. I mean, just on the note of nanny, sometimes I know we've all found people that were unexpected connections, like you meet someone that's a nanny that's a really good fit for you and your family, and that's great. And maybe you meet the first interview that you go on with a doula just like doesn't seem like the right fit. But in the same way, you choose a doctor or a chiropractor or someone like that, and you know, if it's not the right fit, like you wouldn't go to a doctor and say, well, I didn't like that doctor, so I'm just gonna see an acupuncturist or a chiropractor or a nurse, or, you know, like if you need a doctor, then that's who you need. And I think doulas sometimes, like, it's very much about finding the right fit. This person's going to be in your house, in your vulnerable space. They're seeing you at a vulnerable time. Like, it's so important to get the right fit. And the same thing goes for a nanny, but they're just not necessarily they don't replace one another.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about having the team we do, is because of, you know, and they're all wonderful, but they all have different personalities. And I agree, like, I'm a definite type of personality that wouldn't want certain traits in a postpartum doula that another mother would be like, no, I need those. So I think you're right, and, you know, meet 2 or 3 of them if you have to. If you connect with the first one right away, awesome, which most of them do, because all of our doulas are lovely. But yeah, I mean, it's not like it's not like a personal stab to the heart or anything if you don't get hired. Just maybe it's a personality, just the personalities don't fit.
Right. And we, not in a bad way, but like at Meet the Doula events, or when there's a lot of us, you know, we can feel that too. Like as a group of doulas, when a family walks in, you can say like, oh, that's totally a doula family for Kristen. Like she's got that one for sure. And it's not like, that doesn't mean we don't like them. Like, I can still totally love a family and want the best for them, but just say like, oh, I can totally tell that they're a good match for someone else.
Yeah, I agree. We do that. Even a phone conversation, we can tell, like, you know, 5 minutes of talking to a mom on the phone, I can be like, you know who you need to talk to. Gina, Julie, Kelsey. Yeah, like, you can totally get that vibe right away. Yes. And usually it's spot on.
Oh yeah, women's intuition. Like,
like, I feel you, mama, I got you. Okay, so when you're traveling with a family, you know, a nanny just has a salary.
Right.
Is that how it works? So everything's the same?
I think so.
But a postpartum doula is an hourly rate. So explain what that looks like for families if they wanted to go on a, you know, say they were going on vacation for 2 weeks and they had a 9-week-old baby and wanted to bring a postpartum doula along. What do the hours look like? How do you figure out pay?
It varies per family again. However, I think the idea that you're taking someone on vacation, so you should be able to get a discounted rate, at first glance, that does make sense. However, when you look at the flip side of that, you're asking someone to uproot their lives, make sure everything is taken care of on a last-minute basis, and any plans that they may have had in those next 2 weeks, they have to reschedule. So we are really putting our life on pause for this family, and I think for that reason, there are things that are just assumed that they're going to be paid for, like the accommodations and the ticket. And no, travel doulas aren't for everyone because they can be more expensive than a regular postpartum doula. I mean, you're traveling, so in that sense, it's more expensive in general. But usually the rate is about the same. We're all flexible and we want to help, so we're willing to make it work with families. But that being said, it's usually around the same rate in my experience and what I've heard from other doulas that are also doing this. And as for hourly schedules, we are there.
You can either be there for 10 hours a day or 24, depending on what the family wants, right?
Right. And it's kind of up to the family and the doula, because just like in any other doula work, like if I'm doing an overnight shift here in Grand Rapids, I might be asleep for 3 of those hours and still getting paid to be present in case something were to happen. And so that's something that the doula and the family need to work out of. If they want overnight support, is that sleeping overnight support, or would they rather have, you know, maybe something until like 3 a.m. and then switch so that the doula can get some sleep? Or there's always a way to work it. And if cost is a limiting factor, then maybe 24-hour support isn't the best choice. But there's just so many different ways to work that, just like natural doula work in any other location. And I think most people usually would prefer to have like a 12-hour shift or something like that, and then have a little time where it's just them and just their new family, and have that bonding time where there's not another person kind of butting in and out, because after a while, if you can tell that everything is going really smoothly, it's like, I don't need to ask you again if you need anything. I can tell you don't.
Right.
But if we're traveling with you, like, wherever you are, you know, it's not that we're out like partying in Mexico for 3 hours and coming back to you. Like, we're probably just like right down the street or like at the beach or getting lunch just in case you like, and that's in case you call or something like that. So it's so flexible, and maybe a little bit, I think doulas are maybe a little bit more available in that kind of circumstance. Like, if you wanted more care, we're already right there.
Right. Whereas a nanny service could be a little bit more rigid. Like, you have her from this time to this time, and if you call after that, she's not going to answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing about those, like, excursion, like going out into the world excursion kind of thing, like, when I was living in Sonoma, there were families that would want to go wine tasting or something like that during the day, which is great. Like, live it up. And I don't know if that really counts so much as traveling. It's more just like a day-long event that just, it's like, I need an extra pair of hands. I need someone to juggle all these things. And
you know, wine tasting specifically, you want a pair of sober hands, right?
Yes.
To be holding, caring for your baby while you go wine tasting. It's probably a really good choice.
And a lot of, I guess that's not something that, I don't know if we would run into that here very often. Like, people, the beer thing, like, people would go like on a beer tour or something like that, which is like, that's great, get out, do your thing. And yes, a pair of sober hands to like make sure there's a quiet place for napping. And you'd be amazed, like, some of those places, I mean, if you're going to go on like a wine tasting day or like bop around a city, like, it's totally beautiful and it's totally feasible. It's not this like crazy wild drunken event. It's okay to bring your baby with you. It's just there need to be safety precautions in place.
Right.
So another pair of hands, yes, is critical.
Well, and especially if you have, let's say you have a 3-year-old as well. I think that makes it even trickier. You just say, okay, I'm just not even going to do these outings anymore.
Yeah.
But if you know you have this trusted professional that can come with you, why not? And why not bring the kids along and let them experience this? And everyone can enjoy it.
Yes. And just in terms of like mental health, overall well-being, like that kind of feeling when you know you can go out and do something that you really want to do. In 15 hours, you're going to feel like a better person than when you were stuck at the house. Like, I can't leave. I'm stuck here. And just having that mentality switch of like, I have this liberation. I have the choice to make that if I wanted to go do this thing, I could, is so relieving, because I mean, a lot of moms just feel stuck. Like, I have to take care of my 2 kids right now, and they're both driving me crazy at the same time, but I can't leave.
Right. And obviously money is a factor for some families.
Definitely.
And in that sense, you know, a neighborhood little girl mother's helper might be the right fit for them if that's all that they have the resources for.
Yes.
And then, yeah, I mean, in-home doula support is another level, and then traveling would be another level beyond that, you know.
Yes, traveling is definitely the most fortunate option. But even if, I mean, the great thing about postpartum doulas is like, you can have us in your house and you don't need to go anywhere. Like, if you want to go take a nap or take a shower, like, that's normal. That's so much a part of our job.
That's the majority, yeah. We like to tell, I mean, sometimes a client will need to get out, and we tell them, yeah, you know what, go run for a coffee and come back in an hour.
Yes.
But that almost gets into that like babysitter role. Like, I'm just going to watch your kids while you leave. So we don't really, you know, I think as a postpartum doula, to be there with the family is critical, because you can see them in action. You can help the mother bond with her baby if you see her struggling, or help her with breastfeeding support, or tell her, you know what, go take a shower and take a nap. I got this. And when she wakes up and you've done the dishes, the baby's napping, and you're picking up the house, she's like, you're an angel. Like, this all happened in 2 hours? Like, how did you do this? So I think really being there for the family when the family's there is critical, but there are those times of need where you're like, this mom needs to get out. And whether you go with her or tell her to go alone, I think sometimes that's just as important.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is nice to have a whole family perspective, to see everyone together. And I know that's hard, especially if one parent is working, or if it's a couple and one person is working. Already by the time they get a postpartum doula in the house, that can be really challenging. But I've definitely had families who, even when there's only one person, you can feel something is just like in the air kind of thing. Like, we're not talking about the partner that's not home, and there's of course different ways to handle that. You know, we do hear it a fair amount, and there's that fine line that's like, oh, playing around, and you know, maybe that's how the relationship is with those people, that they've always kind of like joked with each other like that. But sometimes it's not. Your hormones are all over the place, and doulas have a limited role in that, I think. As a postpartum doula, there's definitely been times where I just thought, you know what, this is maybe rooted deeper than the postpartum period. And I know that therapy sounds like a 4-letter word for some people, but there's so many different ways to access really great conflict resolution and therapeutic helpers in the world. You know, it can sometimes just be a phone call from home that's really private. And if that's something that is very like built up already in someone's mind, maybe that can, you know, we can find the resources. But yeah, most of all, I think we're the eyes in those kinds of circumstances to just be able to sense out how strong the conflict is, you know, to be able to make a plan of attack. And a lot of times, I mean, we get to ask the questions that are the uncomfortable questions that the cousin or the aunt or the mother-in-law would notice but wouldn't want to say anything, because you want to preserve that relationship for a lifetime, and it's a little more delicate.
Or if they did ask, mom wouldn't answer honestly, or would be offended, or would get angry. But coming from her doula, who is in her home and she loves and now trusts, it feels like a friend asking.
Yes.
And you're available to be open and vulnerable with this person. It's amazing how quickly that bond forms between a doula and a parent. Like they become so vulnerable with you. And I think that's the beauty of the relationship that becomes between these two, you know, 3. Usually it's mom, baby, and doula. Like have this relationship, and that's why it's so hard to leave, because mom has formed this bond, and baby too. You know, oftentimes it's really hard to leave that baby that you've been with for, you know, especially we have birth doulas who have been with a mom throughout pregnancy. They were there for labor and delivery, and then there for months afterwards. So that, I mean, that's a really strong bond. It's really hard to sever.
Yeah, absolutely it is, especially because you want to see the next step. You know, there's always that one next thing that's up and almost there, and you just want to be there for it. And yeah, that is a hard bond to sever. And they don't have to be severed. I mean, we're always like, we love, like, doulas are just such big lovers that, you know, it doesn't have to be this severed bond that's like you never speak to each other again. We just aren't going to be in your house 4 days a week.
Right. Well, you end up becoming Facebook friends and following photos there, or they'll send random photos on, you know, via text. So yeah, I think that their relationship continues. It's just a little less frequent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. If anyone's interested in learning more about Kelsey or hiring her for, you know, in-home or traveling doula, she is available.
Thank you.
You can find us at goldcoastdoulas.com. You can listen to our podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Thanks for listening.